A frightened German shepherd lay trembling as a furious crowd closed in, ready to drive him away. But just as a man lifted his foot to kick the helpless dog, a tiny baby waddled forward. And what happened next stopped everyone in their tracks. Leaving the entire marketplace in tears. At first, no one noticed the German shepherd curled up against the wall near the bakery. His fur was matted with dust, his body shaking from cold and fear. A passing man frowned, muttering under his breath, "Stray dog again," and nudged him with his foot. The dog let out a sharp yelp that turned a few heads. Soon, a small crowd formed, murmuring in annoyance. "These dogs are dangerous," one woman said, pulling her child closer. Another man, growing impatient, kicked a loose pebble toward the trembling animal. The German shepherd flinched, pressing himself tighter against the wall, his eyes wide with fear. The marketplace buzzed with life, but for this one helpless creature, the world had turned cold and cruel. And the worst was yet to come. Barely 2 years old, the toddler waddled along the cobblestones, clutching a tiny stuffed bear in one hand. His chubby legs wobbled with each determined step, but his wide, curious eyes were locked on the commotion ahead. The baby paused, tilting his head, as he saw the German shepherd trembling on the ground. The adults were busy scolding and waving their hands, trying to shoo the dog away, but the little one didn't see danger. He saw someone who needed help. He let out a soft coo, his voice barely louder than a whisper, but it carried just enough to catch the dog's attention. The shepherd lifted his head slightly, ears twitching. Their eyes met, innocent blue to fearful brown, and for a moment, the noisy market faded into silence. The dog didn't growl or bark. He simply whimpered, as if begging for someone to understand. The toddler took another step forward, completely fearless. A few adults noticed and reached out instinctively. "Wait, get the baby back," one woman called, panic creeping into her voice. But the child kept toddling toward the dog, tiny hand reaching out, unshaken by the chaos around him. Something extraordinary was about to happen, something that no one in that crowded street would ever forget. The German shepherd trembled as the crowd loomed over him, their voices harsh and unforgiving. One man muttered, "Someone needs to get rid of this dog," and raised his foot as if to kick him away. The shepherd flinched, curling into himself, his tail tucked tightly between his legs. And then, in the very next moment, a tiny figure stood between the dog and the angry crowd. The baby, barely reaching the adult's knees, spread his little arms wide, his round face set with an expression far too serious for someone so small. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as the child wobbled but held his ground, shielding the trembling dog. The man froze mid-step, his eyes widening in shock. The German shepherd's whimpers quieted, replaced by a soft whine of confusion. Slowly, the baby turned to face him and crouched slightly, his tiny hand reaching out. The crowd held its breath. Would the dog lash out? Would the baby be hurt? Instead, the dog hesitated, sniffed the air, and then lowered his head into the child's hand. A shiver ran through his body as he licked the baby's small fingers, a gesture of surrender and trust. The toddler giggled softly, patting the shepherd's head as if they had known each other forever. Around them, the crowd grew silent. The anger and annoyance that had filled the air only moments ago melted into awe. People began to lower their eyes, some stepping back with a hint of shame. They were witnessing something pure, something human words could never explain. In that instant, the marketplace no longer saw a stray dog. They saw a soul asking for kindness, protected by the smallest guardian imaginable. The bustling noise of vendors and chatter seemed to fade as everyone's eyes fixed on the fragile, heart-stopping scene. A toddler shielding a frightened German shepherd with nothing but love in his tiny hands. The man who had almost kicked the dog lowered his foot slowly, his face pale. I didn't know," he muttered, taking a step back. A woman clutched her chest, whispering, "Oh my God, he's just scared." The crowd's anger began to dissolve, replaced by an uneasy guilt that spread from person to person. An elderly man with a walking cane shuffled forward. His voice, gentle but firm, broke the silence. "Look at him," he said, pointing to the trembling shepherd. "He's hurt, not dangerous. Shame on us for letting fear blind our hearts." The crowd began to see what the baby had seen all along. The dog's left leg was swollen and limping, a thin streak of dried blood marking his fur. His ribs showed beneath his coat. This wasn't a threat. It was a life begging for help. The toddler giggled softly and wrapped his little arms around the shepherd's neck, resting his cheek against the dog's head. A collective gasp escaped the onlookers, followed by misty eyes and trembling lips. Some people turned away to wipe their tears. The shepherd closed his eyes for a moment, exhaling as if he finally felt safe. For the first time that morning, compassion replaced cruelty in the marketplace. People began to step forward, not to harm, but to help. The smallest child had reminded the entire crowd what it meant to be human. A young woman knelt down beside the baby, her voice trembling as she said, "He's hurt. We can't leave him like this." She reached out gently, letting the shepherd sniff her hand before softly petting his head. The dog's ears twitched, and he allowed her touch, though his body still trembled. Soon, others joined her. One man removed his jacket and carefully draped it over the dog to keep him warm. Another hurried to the nearby veterinary clinic to call for help. Even the man who had almost kicked the shepherd earlier now crouched down, whispering apologies under his breath, guilt etched across his face. The baby, oblivious to the adult's shame, just kept patting the dog's head and giggling, his small presence radiating warmth. It was as if his simple act of kindness had unlocked compassion in everyone around him. Moments later, a veterinarian arrived with a small medical kit and a stretcher. He examined the shepherd with gentle hands. "He's malnourished and has a sprained leg," he explained, "but he'll survive, thanks to this little hero." The crowd watched in awe as the dog was lifted onto the stretcher, his eyes never leaving the baby. By the time the dog was carried off to safety, there wasn't a dry eye in the square. Everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. A tiny child had reminded an entire crowd that kindness could save a life. Hours later, at the local veterinary clinic, the German shepherd lay on a soft blanket, his injured leg wrapped in clean bandages. The shepherd's eyes were gentler now, no longer filled with fear, as he sniffed curiously at the small stuffed bear that the baby had placed beside him. "Will he be okay?" the mother asked softly. The veterinarian nodded with a warm smile. "He's lucky. He'll need rest, good food, and a lot of love, but he'll recover. Honestly, he might not have survived the day if your little one hadn't stepped in when he did." The father knelt next to his son, ruffling his hair. "You're a hero, buddy," he whispered. The baby just giggled and reached for the dog's paw, and the shepherd responded with a soft lick to his hand. A week later, the German shepherd had fully adapted to his new environment. The baby's family decided to adopt him, giving him the name Guardian. For the silent way he had bonded with the smallest protector he could ever imagine. It wasn't just the dog's life that had changed that day. It was everyone who had witnessed a baby's pure act of love. Sometimes, the smallest hands carry the biggest hearts.